As you can see, everything is frozen today. You got an aquarium right next to a seafood restaurant. Let's have a look at the sign. As you can see, we are in St Andrews.
Is it better if I stand away from it?
Yeah. Give you a full view. Oh, the Witch's Lake. So there you go. We think that we can actually see Tenspear from here. It's looking very inviting, even though it's quite cold. The wind is pretty cutting. So we've been in St Andrews before, and I will link the video of us visiting St Andrews. Today, however, we are after St Andrews Castle, because that's a place we haven't been to last time we were in St Andrews. So we came back for it. We still have a Historic Scotland membership, so we want to make use of it. And we're going to get into St Andrews Castle for free. So please come along. Look at these big boys. This is the best I could do. So yeah, this is the Martyrs Monument. He's not gonna attack you. Maybe. I almost walked past it. Here's the entrance to St Andrews Castle. Here are the current prices. Let's go check it out. There's some Pictish stones in here.
I should track them one by one. Safe conduct under the Privy Seal. What do you think, you know? I am the King, Bishop. Bishop, it was he who said that I should track them one by one. He who said that the Scots nobles were like a quiver of arrows and they couldn't be broken together. And I will. And I shall do my own hand the same.
Did not your Lord Jesus Christ himself say, as private and thieves? And did he not count the defiles this house of prayer? Cast them out, I say, and set the graven images.
So, while you're coming along with us on a tour of St Andrews Castle, let me tell you about its history. Scottish castles are usually tied to royalty or nobility, but in this case, its historical importance is mainly that of an ecclesiastical seat of power. Important bishops and archbishops lived and died here. St Andrews itself is named after Scotland's patron saint, St Andrew. According to popular legend, the saint's relics were brought here from Greece in the 4th century by Saint Rule, who was shipwrecked on the coast of Fife. Although, take it with a pinch of salt, since the story did not make its rounds before the 12th century. However, already during Pictish times, there was ecclesiastical activity here. In 747, the Irish annals record the death of an abbot named Tuathalan, the first known reference to the settlement. Historians believe that one of the Pictish kings first established a monastic community here. This king might have been Onwist, son of Wurgist, because a richly decorated sarcophagus was found in St Andrews, dating from the late 8th century, lining up with Onwist's death in 761. An alternative theory about the relics of St Andrews is that they were brought by Bishop Acca of Hexham in 732. Either way, the presence of these relics, which allegedly included a tooth, a kneecap, 3 fingers, and an arm bone, is what attracted people to St Andrews. It became a pilgrimage site. There's quite a few of these 2 false starts. I'm looking forward to seeing the tunnel or the mine. That's the bit that I looked through earlier. Queen Margaret, wife of Malcolm III, established the Queen's Ferry over the Firth of Forth to give easy access to pilgrims in the 1070s. Margaret's 5th son, Alexander I, reformed the Scottish Church in the early 12th century with the help of Robert, Prior of Scone, who was appointed bishop to St Andrews, then known as Kilremont. As bishop, he introduced Augustinian canons, which would rival and supersede the Chaldees. Around 1140, King David I gave permission for the founding of an ecclesiastical borough, and the building of St Andrews Cathedral began in the 1160s, cementing St Andrews as the seat of bishops. A stone marked Robertus was found on the site of St Andrews Castle, which might refer to Bishop Robert and could be the very earliest building on this site. This earliest version from the 12th century also was modified with masonry by Bishop Roger de Beaumont. The only part of the stonework survives in the fore tower, which is also the tallest part of the castle remaining. This early structure was heavily impacted during the Wars of Scottish Independence between 1296 and 1357. In 1290, Bishop William Fraser invited Edward I to St Andrews to sort out a succession conflict. Edward I chose John Balliol under the premise that Scotland would be a vassal state, though John Balliol later rebelled and Edward I attacked Scotland. So this led the Scots to rise up against Edward. In 1304, Edward ordered the roof of St Andrews Cathedral to be stripped for lead in defence of Stirling Castle against William Wallace. Look at this tiny door. This must be another prison cell, perhaps. What a nice view. Bishop William Lamberton of St Andrews secretly attended the coronation of Robert the Bruce as the new king at Scone Abbey in 1306. Now known as Robert I, he retook Scottish territory by 1318, and on the 5th of July 1318, Lamberton and Robert I consecrated the cathedral. Robert died in 1329 and left a 5-year-old as his successor, which triggered a second war of independence. St Andrews Castle was recaptured by the English in the 1330s and refortified. Sir Andrew Murray successfully besieged the castle in 1337 and dismantled its defences. After this devastation and the end of the wars, Bishop Walter Traill took on the reconstruction of the castle. A drawbridge, which was added by the English in the 1330s, was moved over from the fore tower to today's location around 1390. And the fore tower was converted into private apartments. The castle then consisted of 5 rectangular towers surrounding the courtyard with added wide and deep ditches for defence. Traill died in its walls in 1401. He is followed by Henry Wardlaw, who also became the founder of St Andrews University in 1413, which is Scotland's first university. James I of Scotland was educated by Wardlaw and spent Christmas of 1425 here in the castle. His grandson, James III, was probably born in the castle in 1452. The sea tower in the northwest was generally used as a prison tower, with comfortable apartments at the top for VIPs, and the infamous bottle dungeon at the very bottom. The eldest son and heir of King Robert III, David, was imprisoned here in 1402 on the orders of his uncle, probably at the top. The fate of the Scottish kings also impacted St Andrews. When James IV died in the Battle of Flodden, the Archbishop of St Andrews, Alexander Stewart, who happened to be the king's illegitimate son, was also there and passed away too. A big power scramble ensued. The first to take the empty archbishop's seat was Andrew Forman, but then in 1521 he was succeeded by James Beaton. Beaton was also a political influence at the court of the very young James V, and the head of the Scottish Church. Beaton was an assertive character and helped set up an alliance with France against Henry VIII. On the downside, however, he was enforcing religious lines in a very unscrupulous manner. At the time, Protestantism was spreading all over Britain, albeit slowly at the time, and Beaton tried his best to suppress it. One of the things James Beaton is infamous for is the trial and execution of Protestant preacher Patrick Hamilton, who was burned at the stake in 1528. Beaton also invested in strengthening the defences of St Andrews Castle. James Beaton arranged for his nephew David to follow in his footsteps, and so in 1538 David Beaton became Archbishop of St Andrews and the first Scotsman in 150 years to be Cardinal of the Church. To say he was ambitious is probably an understatement. He was very connected to the French court and scheming in the background, thwarting a proposed marriage between Mary Queen of Scots and Henry VIII's son, which led to renewed conflict between England and Scotland. Tensions between Catholics and Protestants were high. A Protestant preacher called George Wishart had been spreading ideas of Reformation throughout Scotland with the help of John Knox, his sword carrier. In March 1546, George Wishart was burnt at the stake. That was actually the last straw, as there were already many nobles who had converted to Protestantism, and in May a group of 5 lairds disguised themselves as stonemasons, snuck into the castle, overwhelmed the guards, and after stabbing Beaton, they hung his naked body from the walls. The Earl of Arran, regent to Mary Queen of Scots, ordered for the castle to be besieged and the murderers to be brought to justice. I think we have arrived at the thing that I've been looking forward to the most. This is where we're going to go just now. The walls had been fortified even further before Beaton's murder and proved hard to breach, so the attackers decided to undermine the walls and started to dig a tunnel. The defenders could see this activity and started to dig a countermine to intercept this. They dug down from 2 positions, both false starts that remain as well-like structures nowadays, until they eventually got it right. I can see how they've been. You can see where they're saying go at your own risk. It's pretty low. Makes me feel like some kind of rodent. They could hear the digging sound of tools against the rock and were trying to guess the correct position. Yeah, nice echoey atmosphere in this mine. The attacker's mine was spacious enough to allow for pack animals to transport the rock outside, but the countermine was very narrow and dug in haste. With one blind arm after they had to correct the course, eventually the countermine broke through and the besiegers were repelled. Ooh. It's a tiny hole. Wow. Okay, it's a bit easier to stand in here. The siege continued for over a year, and in April 1547, during a truce, John Knox briefly spoke to the weary defenders. Cardinal Beaton's body during all of this had been thrown down into the bottle dungeon and covered in salt because, according to the defenders, he stank terribly. Soon the truce was broken by a French fleet arriving in support of the attackers, who started to bombard the castle from the sea, while the front of the castle was also bombarded from land, destroying parts of the castle in the process, especially the Great Hall. This proved too much for the defenders to handle, and they were arrested, tried, and sentenced to work in the galleys, including John Knox.
It's really warm and damp in this mine. Feeling really warm compared to outside, but you can feel the air when you breathe it in. It's really quite heavy with all that dampness in it. But it smells not too bad, like it doesn't smell mouldy or anything. It smells quite nice actually, just earthy. Ooh. Tight squeeze. That's how low this is here. That was fun. Those of you who are not a fan of squeezing yourself into tight caves might not agree.
Beaton was succeeded by John Hamilton, an illegitimate half-brother of Regent Arran, and the castle was repaired and refurbished. The present entrance front was added in the 1550s, featuring Hamilton's coat of arms and cinquefoil flowers.
So unfortunately we won't be able to see Cardinal Beaton's chambers. Can only squeeze myself in.
Hamilton tried to reform the Catholic Church in Scotland, but Protestantism had grown too strong, and in 1560 the Pope's authority was rejected and the Catholic Mass abolished. On the 11th of June 1559, John Knox had returned from his exile and held a sermon in the Holy Trinity Church here in St Andrews, inciting the locals against the Catholics. The result was an angry mob attacking and partially destroying St Andrews Cathedral, ripping down the rich furnishings. Hamilton could only give it up and flee at this point, and the cathedral's roof was stripped, the walls quarried for stone. Now he was the one persecuted for holding Catholic Mass.
It's a loo that empties out into the sea. A nice view. This is the prisoners' block with a sea view for important people, and below is the bottle dungeon. So, in fact, prisoners would be lowered down by a rope and then had to stay down there. And of course, Cardinal Beaton's body was thrown down there, covered in lead, so that he wouldn't just decompose all over the place. That is pretty terrifying. This is what the bottle dungeon looks like. This could be the little slit where they put the food through for the prisoners. Yeah, you can see it here. Food is coming through. So we just finished up the audio guide, and if you come to St Andrews for a visit, I would recommend visiting the castle as well. You definitely need to take a couple of hours because there's a lot to see and it's all very interesting. The audio guide definitely does flesh out the history pretty well. So a thumbs up for me, and I'm gonna go and see if I can get some more nice sunset pictures. I think it's getting up to 2 o'clock now and the sun is already setting. Such is the winter time. On the upside you get these beautiful light conditions.
The position of Bishop of St Andrews was retained, and the castle was occasionally used as residence or state prison. Although James VI and Charles I supported the importance of St Andrews, it never really recovered as the ecclesiastical centre it used to be. The castle changed hands and sporadic repairs were made. In 1638, the office of the bishop was abolished. It was restored again in 1661, but then finally abolished for good in 1689. In the sketch from 1693, the castle was already depicted as a ruin, as it had lost its function. Along with the castle and cathedral, the borough also declined, trade diminished, and wealthier members of society moved away. By the late 1700s, however, attempts were made to care for and restore the medieval buildings and churches. During the early Middle Ages, Christianity was mainly spread to Scotland from Ireland by the likes of St Columba, Scotland's previous patron saint. The Chaldees, or Seli De, meaning clients or companions of God, established monasteries in many places in Scotland. St Andrews was first known as Kenry Mona, which was turned into Kilrymond over time. It means church on the head of the King's Mount, possibly referring to the rocky outcrop that the castle and cathedral are part of. During this time, the Chaldees were the established order under St Columba. Pictish culture gradually began to merge with Gaelic culture, pushing in from the west, and eventually was subsumed. Pictland became Alba, land of the Scots. Some of the bishops of Alba were likely based here. King Constantine, son of Ed, retired into monastic life here in 943. Just outside the cathedral walls are the ruins of St Mary's Church, which was part of the oldest monastic complex in St Andrews, and the place where the Chaldees would stay after the Augustinians took over the cathedral grounds. The other earliest surviving building is St Rule's Church, which might go back to the 11th century, but most of it was built after Bishop Robert arrived in 1123. It was the first cathedral building while the actual cathedral was being built, and it has survived the best in the whole complex actually. Cathedral construction began in 1160, and it took over a century to complete. They started with the east end, with the choir and the high altar. The west end wasn't completed until the 1270s, and they even had to redo the west front in 1272 after it was blown away by strong winds. Because of the Wars of Independence, the church wasn't consecrated until the 5th of July 1318 in the presence of King Robert I. And of course, its ultimate fate was met when it was ransacked after the sermon of John Knox. Another well-preserved part is Pensgate, which was built and modified throughout the 14th century. It served as the principal entrance to the sprawling and walled cathedral grounds. Golf and the university ended up being St Andrew's saviour. Starting in the 1700s, golf balls and clubs were produced here and exported. Golf tourism also took off. Nowadays, it's also a bustling university town, which you can see in the Wardlaw Museum, which we also visited. Of course, the lens is going to steam up now that we've come in from the cold. So we are finishing the day where we started it. And you, thank you for coming along today.